figures are those of legend and myth, and its miracles are fairy tales for scared children, and all of this. And all this is now completely impossible to deny or to refute, but nonetheless, it has an ethical basis. These fairy tales at least teach children how to behave well. The beginning of the argument must be that we say this is not so. We are not conceding this to the faithful. Is it moral, for example, to tell children, to tell anybody, that their sins can be forgiven them because of a human sacrifice in which they had no say, in which if they had any childish say, they would have wanted to stop, wouldn't have wanted to see happen? That because of the hideous public torture and death of someone 2,000 years ago, that their personal responsibility is dissolved. All they need to do is to recognize the beauty of this human sacrifice, throw their sins on the scapegoat, and be forgiven them. That's a positively immoral doctrine in my submission. I could, if I wanted to, offer to pay your debts. I'm not gonna. But I could, if I liked you enough. I could do that. I could, if I really, really liked you enough. I suppose there's no system that allows it, but I could. There used to be in primitive society. I could offer to serve your term in prison for you, if I knew you and I believed in you. We know of cases, Charles Dickens's Tale of Two Cities is the most luminous, where someone will even take someone else's place on the scaffold. They'll do their suffering for them. They'll pay their debts. But they can't take away their responsibility. They can't say those sins never occurred. And it would be immoral to try. So at the very centerpiece of the main religion, at any rate in these United States, there is something that is positively wicked. We are not arguing. It's insulting for us to be made to argue that we might be less ethical or moral because we don't believe. It's not enough for us to say, hey, you can be a good person and be an atheist. Somebody at the convention of AAI the other day in Washington was quoted on television just before I was interviewed. That's why I saw it, saying, well, we're good people, we're just not God people. No, nice try. Get off the apologetic, get off the defensive. You can't be a good person and a God person. You can't be. Religion is the inculcation by coercion, not just of irrationality, but of immorality. What is moral about vicarious redemption, the horrible doctrine I just mentioned? What is moral about the mutilation of the genitals of children in the name of God? What is moral about that? The genital mutilation community is entirely theocratic. It should accept responsibility for what it advocates and not say it's teaching morality. What about the Muslim injunction that anyone wishing to change their religion to become an apostate must be killed? Is it moral teaching to say that people who have second thoughts about faith must suffer the death penalty? I hardly think so. Is it moral for Orthodox Jews to greet every lovely day with thanking their Maker for not making them a woman or a Gentile, a goy? Is it moral for the women to have to say that we thank God for making us the way we are? Actually, that's not at least immoral, but there's something somewhat fatuous about it. I hope you'll agree. It's a form of sadomasochism, which, despite some of its advocates, I don't think is good for you in the long run. You're told to begin with that you are a worm, a sinful, guilty, shrunken, miserable creature who has, as we used to be made to say in Anglican school, no health in us. The Quran says made of a clot of blood. The Bible says dust. The Jews say, thank God at least you're not a goy. You begin with this abject masochism. You're told that you're responsible for sins that were committed before you were born, that you couldn't have influenced. That your only chance is to take part in a barbaric ritual of torture and death. If you were to be free of this inherited burden, it's almost worse than race theory. But just because no one can be that abject for so long or forever, there's a compensating offer. Well, the universe is designed with you in mind, and God has a plan for you. So from being a groveling worm and clump of blood clot or dust, you can go straight to saying, well, there's a divine scheme and it has me in mind, to the most arrant, the most solipsistic self-centeredness and arrogance. This is not morality. This is bound to lead to bad behavior, psychically, physically, socially. And it always has, and it always will. Is wish thinking moral? I don't think it's moral at all to lie to children. When I meet people in holy orders and I feel I'm meeting someone who is paid to lie to children, I don't think that's a moral calling or occupation. To tell children that they should be terrified of hell, or that if they do a right action, or if they avoid wrong actions, as defined as inescapable, they might go to heaven. This is wicked. It's ruined the childhoods of millions of children down the generations. We have some, but not all, of their memoirs. There's certainly nobody in this room who doesn't know somebody whose life was effectively wrecked by this. And it has something else that's not moral or defensible, which is an implicit appeal to the totalitarian. The origins of totalitarianism, our greatest enemy, lie in this. We're told that we wouldn't know a right from a wrong action. We wouldn't be able to tell, let alone to perform one, if we were not already the property of a celestial dictator, who we must love and fear at the same time. Compulsory love is a pretty horrible idea. The fear that goes with it is a little more than the negation of that. Let me give you an instance of what I mean. I've been to all three of the axis of evil countries now. I'm the only writer who has. When I was a child and I was told about heaven and hell, I couldn't form a picture of heaven because I was told, well, what it would be was eternal praise, everlasting praise, and thanks, all the time, thanks, and praise, and thank you, and I'll praise you again, forever, for doing what appears to come to you naturally, and having made me out of a clot of blood. Sounded like hell to me. Of hell, of course, a child can be given an awful picture, and many children never get over it. But I couldn't imagine what it would be like to live like that, forever praising. Well, now I've been to North Korea and I do know. The only duty or right of the half-starved citizen is to thank for his handful of dirty rice every day, or hers, the dear leader who makes it possible. There is no other culture. All films, all plays, all classes in school, all programs on the TV and the radio, they're all about the same thing. You have to thank the dear leader. Would that were enough. The dear leader is only the head of the party and the army in North Korea. He's not the president of North Korea. The president is his father, who's been dead for 15 years. Did you know that? Well, North Korea has a dead president. It's a necrocracy. A thanatocracy. A mausolocracy. It's a death cult, and you may have noticed it's only one short of a trinity. And the son is the reincarnation of this father. And now I know what it would be like. Now I know what it would be like. And I wasn't able in the article I wrote to begin to describe the horrific pointlessness and misery of what it would be like to be a North Korean, even for half a day. None of you can imagine it, but it's what theocracy wants you to imagine and be grateful for. And I'll add this. At least you can fucking die and get out of North Korea. It is the only way you can leave that hermetic nightmare. Not so with monotheism. When you die is when the totalitarianism really begins. Now, who wants this to be true? Who but someone servile and stupid and pathetic wants it to be true that they can be convicted of thought crime at any minute of their day or night as they're sleeping for thinking the wrong thing? Who wants to be always in debt to someone who never asked them if they wanted the loan in the first place? Who wants this? All of us who, as Americans, oppose the very idea of unfreedom and tyranny must say that this is where the resistance to totalitarianism really begins, by the repudiation of religion and by the defiance of theocracy. And that's where the battle for our values has to start. So, religion abolishes our obligation to live in truth, very important part of our basic integrity. It caters to our worst solipsism and our worst masochism simultaneously, thus denies us our self-respect. On the trail, so to say, I've evolved 3 challenges. Well, 2 really. One takes a dual form, if you'll allow the expression. On this matter of ethics and morality, I say to every cleric I've debated with, and to all of their audiences, and I've said it on the Christianity Today website now, on countless TV and radio shows, in print hundreds of times, on public platforms dozens of times, and I've not yet had an answer. If you say that morality can only be derived from a supernatural authority, dictatorship, don't have to say that, just say authority. Then you must be able to name for me an ethical statement made or an ethical action performed by a believer that could not have been performed by a non-believer, by an infidel, that would be forbidden to them, unavailable, inaccessible to them. Can you do it? They haven't yet. The challenge has been out extant for really quite a long time. Whereas, if I can just mention my corollary, if I ask any audience, not just this one, any audience, I did it in Georgetown University, the headquarters of one of the headquarters of the Catholic faith in this country, the night before last. Ask anyone in any audience to say, can they think of a wicked action performed